Okay, so the hard part is now over, which involved modeling the gun, rigging it, and setting up the espresso for the two controllers. So now we can jump on to the texturing. So before we actually get started with the texturing of the gun, I would first like to create a little port on the side of the main body of the gun that's going to be used to eject the spent shells for the bullets. And we're going to set up an emitter for that. So I'm just going to keep this real simple, and I'm going to click on, let's just choose something like the ammo box, and then I'm going to alt click a cube, drag the ammo box out, and this cube here we're just going to call this shell port, and I'm just going to place this over here on the side, but I need to shrink it down a little bit. And this is going to be the opening in the side of the gun where the shells are going to be ejected from. So something like that I think would be okay. And I want to, of course, make it editable. And I want to create a hole here. And we'll just pull that in like that. And now with that shell port selected, I want to go up here to the emitters, and I want to alt-click the emitter. And since we alt-clicked, what it did, it put the shell port as a child. So we just want to take and drag that out. So now we need to take the emitter and we need to position it. And the emitter is always going to be emitting in the plus Z direction. So we need to rotate that around. And we want to drag that out a little bit. And now we just want to go to the emitter tab, and we want to play around with the X size and the Y size to scale it down to fit inside of the hole. Okay, now we want to create a very low poly version of a spent bullet casing, or the shell for it. So we'll click on the emitter, and we'll create a cylinder. So we'll just alt-click the cylinder, drag that out, click on the cylinder, and we're just going to call this casing. And we need to change the orientation to plus X. Need to scale that down. And since it's going to be used with the dynamics, I don't need all of these unnecessary subdivisions in there, so we'll just take the rotational segments down to like maybe 8. And we'll take the height here down a little bit, like something like that. We'll pull it out now, and we'll make it editable. Of course, it's got 2 caps. Those need to be optimized. And we're going to cut a hole here in the front. Push that back in like that. And it's optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I'm just going to take the Fong tag and take it down to about 25. And in doing so, what we get is some hard edges now on this shell. Here we go, on the casing. And that's fine just to leave it like that. If you don't like that look, you can take the Fong angle back up to about 80, and it will kind of smooth things out a little bit. Okay, so now what we want to do is take the casing and place it inside of the emitter. And click on the emitter, and we want to go to the particle tab, and we want to change a few things here. First of all, the show objects is disabled, so we need to click on that. And now when we hit the play button, Now we get all of these shells that are being emitted outward. So we'll go back to the beginning of the timeline. And we want to make these dynamic. So in order to do that, we need to click the emitter and we need to alt-click a MoGraph fracture object. And if we hit play, still nothing is happening, and that's because we need to right-click the fracture object, go to MoGraph tags, rigid body, and I'm just going to change a few things here. The bounce I'm going to take to 0.1, and the friction I'm going to set that to 1. So we'll hit play again, and we get this unwanted effect there. And the reason for that is because the fracture object on the object tab needs to be set to explode segments. Now we'll hit play, and there goes our spent shells being ejected out of the side. But of course, in real life, those shells would be coming out at a higher rate, and they would be going out a little further, and they wouldn't be going out in a grouped or a line like the way they were. If we play this from the side, you can see they're all kind of going out, and in real life they would be kind of going out at random angles. So we want to change a couple parameters on the emitter. So we'll take the birth rate editor and we'll change this to something like maybe 20, and the same for the birth rate renderer. The next thing we want to do is click on the emitter tab, and the angle for the horizon or horizontal and the vertical angle here, these need to be changed. So we need to change these to perhaps maybe 25 degrees and 25 degrees for the vertical as well. And now we'll hit play, and we need to speed this up. So let's go back to the particle, and we need to go to the speed, and let's increase this to something like maybe 550. Hit play again, and there we go. Now that's looking a whole lot better. Okay, so what we need to do now is set up a cube for the floor, because I'd like to be able to test this emitter as these things are hitting the floor, just to see how they're going to interact with it. So I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to scale down the Y a little bit. So we'll just take it to maybe 50 just to even it out. And we'll go to a front view, and I'm going to scale that out, and I'm going to sit it down here where it sits directly underneath this leg. So about there, it looks good to me. And then we'll just scale it out in this direction. Okay, and we need to give this cube a MoGraph tag, rigid body tag as well. And the bounce I'm going to take down to 0.1 and the friction to 1 as well to match the tag from the fracture object. Okay, so we'll hit play now and we'll watch the interaction to see what happens. Alright, so they're really rolling around, and I kind of want to slow them down a little bit when they hit the ground. So I'm going to take the tag here for the floor, and I'm going to change the friction to maybe 2. So we'll hit play again and we'll watch it. Alright, so that looks pretty good. They're rolling around like a real bullet casing would do. So I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good. So the next thing I'd like to do is start on the texturing. So what I figured we would do is we would use some type of steel and metal textures for as part of the stand and whatnot, and maybe we'll put a little bit of dirt texture on it as well. And then for the ammo box back here, and maybe for part of the gun, but I know definitely for the ammo box, I figured maybe we could create a camouflage type material and apply it to the ammo box. So the first thing I'd like to do is start on the ammo box and work our way from there. So I'm going to create a material first, and I'm just going to rename this to camo. And all we're going to be using for this camo color or this camo shader is just the color and specular. So I'm just going to take the specular and I'm going to turn down the width a little bit. Actually, I think I'm going to take the width up to maybe 65, and the height I'll just take down to about 15. Okay, so we'll go to the color channel, and from here we want to click on the little arrow box here for the drop down menu, and we want to choose the Fusion shader. Now the Fusion shader kind of works like a layer shader. It allows you to put multiple layers and multiple noises together, and then you can blend them with different mix modes. So we're going to start out by clicking the Fusion, and for the bass channel here we want to introduce another Fusion shader into that. And then what we want to do is we want to go into this Fusion shader here, so we'll just click on Fusion, and in this Fusion's bass channel we want to introduce another Fusion shader into that one, so we'll go to Fusion. So now we need to set this one up, so we're going to start here on the bass Fusion, so we'll click that, and now this is asking for different channels here. So in this bass channel, let's create some noise. We'll go into the noise, and we want to change the color here to maybe something like a dark green color, and the black will stay black. We'll take the global scale down to about 15. Okay, and then we'll go jump back up. We'll hit the up arrow here. That will take us back to the next level. And now we want to go to the blend channel, and we want to go to noise there as well. Jump into that noise. Take the global scale to 15, and let's take this color white, and let's take it to a pea green kind of color, something like that. And if you click and drag up, it will copy it to the black, and then we'll just take that one and drag it down to get a little bit of a darker green color out of that. So we'll click the up arrow. So now we need to activate the mask channel, but you can see that it's grayed out. So we need to come up here and click on Use Mask. That will now activate the mask channel for us, and we need to go into it, and we need to choose Colorizer. So we'll click on Colorizer, and we need to click on Cycle, and the input will stay at Luminance. And for the texture, we need to go pick Noise. We'll go into the Noise channel, and for the relative scale here for the X, because this is XYZ, I'm going to change this to 250, and the global scale I'm going to take down to about 50. Okay, so we'll go back up, and now I'm going to take this red handle here and pull that down to delete it, and for this yellow one I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to pick an all white. So that's 255 across the RGB color space. So I'm going to pull this in to somewhere near the middle, and I'm going to take the black and pull it in right up next to the white, and that's going to give us this pattern here. So now I'm going to click up to go back here, and you can see that our camouflage color here shader is already starting to take shape. So we've got a little more to go with it. So the next thing we want to do is jump up here with this arrow, and we'll go back up a level. So now we have the Fusion shader here in the bass channel, and now what we want to do is start on this blend channel. So in the blend channel we want to create some noise, and we'll go into the noise, and we'll take the global scale to about 15, and for the colors, for the white, I'm just going to pick another pukey green type of color and just drag that up, and then make this second one here a little darker like that. And then we'll click up again, and we want to activate the mask channel again, so we'll click on the mask and we'll introduce another colorizer into it. We'll click on the colorizer, and we want to do the same thing here that we did for the last one, except this time around what we're going to do is choose a different type of noise. So click on Cycle, and we'll go into the texture, and I want to go to Noise, and for this I'm going to click it, and we're going to change it from Noise to, let's try Displaced Turbulence, and for the relative scale I'll just take this to 200, and we'll leave it there. And maybe we can play with the low clip here a little bit. We'll just bring that to maybe 15, and for the high clip we'll bring it down to about 80. Okay, so we'll go back up. Alright, so there's that. We need to go back up another level. Okay, so we've got a little bit of brown going on in there. Looks pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is jump back up another level. So here we are now back at the main fusion level. And we want to go to the blend channel and introduce a noise shader into that one. So we'll click on it, and we want to take the global scale down to about 15. And for the white color, I'm going to use something like maybe, let's see, maybe something between a green and a blue, but something like a really bright color, like maybe about there maybe. So we'll click on that, and then we'll drag this up to here. We'll click that one, and now we'll just make that one darker. Something like that. We'll jump back up. And to be honest, I don't think I want it that dark. So let's go back and let's change this here to something up a little higher. Something like that. That looks better. So now we'll go back and we need to activate the mask channel. So we'll click there. We'll go to mask, and we need to introduce colorizer into that one as well. So we'll go into it. Need to do the same thing again. We're just going to use a different type of noise. We'll pull these in. Click on cycle. We'll go to the texture, go to noise, jump into the noise, and let's choose something like Naki. I believe that's pronounced Naki. So we need to take the relative scale, and this time for the X value here, I'll just take that up to about 300. And then we'll go back up. And there is our camouflage. Now, I'm not sure if I like that green color, so let's go back and change this to more of a white grayish color, and the same for that. And I actually want a little bit more of that to show up. So let's go to the colorizer, and all we have to do here is just pull these sliders down in order to get more of that to show up. Okay, so there is our camouflage shader. So we'll just click out of that, and now we'll just take this camo shader and we can apply it to our ammo box here. So I'll just bring that over, apply it to the ammo box, and by default the projection is set to UVW mapping, so I'm going to change that to cubic. So there's our ammo box now with our camouflage paint on it, which looks pretty good. So now what we want to do is create a aluminum metal type shader for our gun, and we can use that for different parts. So what we want to do is create a new material, and I'm just going to abbreviate this one and call it Alum for aluminum. And we'll definitely be coming back to the color and diffusion channels later, but for right now the main concern is reflection. If we enable that channel, instantly you can see we've got this chrome ball type look, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to right click on it and choose not GI to change the object to something else, and I'm going to right click again and click on huge. Now keep in mind when you do this, we chose huge and we changed the object with GI, so that means every time we make a change to any of these settings for this material, it's going to have to update itself, so you may have to give it a second depending on how fast or how slow your machine is. So Cinema 4D in the reflection channel has this option called blurriness. And sometimes this works good and sometimes it doesn't, because it relies on sampling. And depending on what you're going to be using this for, this can greatly increase your render times. So keep that in mind when you're using this. Now, I personally think that we'll be able to get away with using it on different parts of the minigun, and that's what we're about to find out. So let's take the blurriness here up to about 20%. And now you can see our metal here is blurred, but it's still kind of, I don't know, it has too much to it. So I'm going to take the brightness down to about 50. Okay, so that looks a little better. And we can take this color here for the white, and I'm going to take it to a gray, maybe 128. And we'll click OK. Alright, so that doesn't look too bad. So let's take and go to the color channel, and I'm going to take the brightness for the color channel down to about 50. Okay, now we're getting this really dark, mysterious gray type look, so I'm going to take this up to maybe 70. I don't want it too dark, but I don't want it overblown and too bright either. Okay, so that looks a lot better right there. So now what we want to do is apply this to part of the gun and see if it's going to take too long to render. So I'm going to use this cylinder here for this test, and we'll just apply that directly to there, and we'll hit render. Okay, so you can see we're getting some reflection in there, and it's actually rendering fairly quick. And the main reason for that is because in the render settings, the anti-aliasing is only set to geometry. But if we were to set this to best and take this to 1:2 on the minimum and maximum levels for the anti-aliasing, and we'll go back and render it again. Okay, so that's actually not too bad. Like I said, I think we'll be able to get away with this. However, there's nothing for this cylinder to pick up for the reflection. The only thing that it's picking up right now in the form of this nasty gray color is the sky object. And the sky object is nothing more than an infinite sky that's producing this gray color because we don't have a shader or anything applied to it. So what we want to do is create something around the scene for this cylinder to have something to pick up on for the reflection channel. Now there are different ways of doing this. The first method is the hard way, and that is to model and texture and light your environment around the gun. So if this gun is going to be outside, then you're going to need to model some trees, the sky, the ground, some rocks, or whatever is going to be around this gun. Now that's just going to take way too long to do. So fortunately, there is another option that works very, very well, and that is using a HDRI image in the luminance channel of a material, and we will just map that onto a large sphere that encompasses and goes around your scene. So I'm going to create a new material, and we don't want to use any of the channels except luminance, so we will activate luminance. And if you head over to hdrmill.com and you go to the freebies tab, they have 4 different types of HDR images here that you can download for free and use. Now, of course, since this is an outdoor scene with a minigun, because I really don't see why we would want to fire a minigun indoors, I really don't see us using the lobby of the Harvest Church. I don't think that's going to go over too well. But perhaps maybe Crater Lake, or maybe the suburb, or perhaps the Meadow Trail. Now, I personally chose the Meadow Trail because it has a good contrast of, we got some yellow in there, we've got some grays over here for the ground, and we've got green and blues. So that's what I chose. So you can click here to download that. It comes in a zip folder. I believe it's probably a little over 11 megabytes in size. So once you have that downloaded and extracted, we want to go to that here in the luminance channel. So we'll just click the arrow and go to load image. And you'll want to locate the directory where you saved your HDR image to, and then we can load that up here in the luminance channel. Okay, so we've got that loaded, and now we can create a sphere, and I'm just going to rename this sphere to HDRI, and we'll position this up somewhere around the gun, about there. We'll take the segments up to about 50, and the radius we want to bring up so it goes around the gun. So we'll just make it an even 1600. And we want to take our material, this HDR, which I'm going to rename it to HDRI, and we'll drop that to the sphere. Now we have a sphere with our hemispherical HDR image applied to it, and if we go inside and we render, now we have our HDR mapped around our scene. Now we have something that this material here can pick up on to reflect. So let's go over to it and let's check it out to see what it looks like. Okay, so it took maybe an extra second or two to render, a little longer than what it did previously, but you can see that we are picking up some nice reflections in there. And if we want to, we can go back to that aluminum material. We'll go to the reflection channel, and I'm just going to change the reflection back to all white here for the color, just to kind of brighten that back up. Okay, so now we're picking up a lot more blues and greens in there. So that actually looks pretty good. So it looks like we'll be able to get away with using that. So it looks like I'm coming up here on the end of this video as well. So one quick thing, if you notice, we've got this large sphere sitting here, and of course at the very end of this tutorial series, when we go to animate the gun, if we render, we're not going to be able to see it because we've got this huge sphere sitting around the gun. So what we can do to get rid of it is right click on the HDRI sphere, go to Cinema 4D Tags, Compositing, and we want to disable cast shadows because we don't want this to cast any shadows. We don't want it to receive any shadows. We do not want it to be seen by the camera. However, we do want it to be seen by rays, and we do want it to be seen by all of these guys over here. Now the gun is not going to have any transparency or refraction, but if you are using those features in your material, then you'll need to have these enabled if you want those transparent and refractive materials to pick up this material here on the sphere. So now when we hit render, now it's gone, but the chrome piece here that we made, or the aluminum piece, is still picking up the reflection. Okay, so all we need to do is disable it for the viewport, and that's double clicking the top traffic light button there. Okay, so that about wraps up this part on the texturing, and in the next part we're going to continue with the texturing and jump into some ambient occlusion and whatnot, because we still need to go back to the color and diffusion channels for this aluminum material, and we're going to talk about global and local ambient occlusion.